hi everyone. Welcome along to the next edition of Precursive Perspective / Precursive Podcast. I'm really excited about today's episode with Sunil Prashara, who is the CEO of the PMI Institute. Sunil and I met many moons ago when he was at Vodafone. And so delighted to connect with you again, Sunil. How are you?
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to connect with you as well. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to have a chat with you.
No, absolutely. Delighted to have you on. Lots of things that I want to talk about. I think you've got I think why I love doing this show is we have people on who have a real, I think, diverse range of backgrounds and experience. And you've done quite a number of things in your career and in life. And you are, like me, I think, a Liverpool fan.
I am indeed. Yay.
Very good. Very good. So I am a Liverpool fan, Sunil, from the years of Jan Molby. If you remember Jan Molby, candy shirts, you know, he was gliding around that midfield, distributing, not tracking back. So that was the time when I actually went to Anfield and was in the Kop. So
Jan Molby used to live on the same estate as my parents and I. You know, we grew up. I grew up north in the northwest, and when Jan Molby moved in, he moved into our estate, and my mum wasn't a big soccer fan.
Okay.
And she went. She was doing something for charity, and she was collecting on behalf of some charity. I'm talking about years ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember the full story, but I haven't heard Jan's name for a long time. So all of a sudden, it just triggered a memory of my mom knocking on his door and asking him for some dosh for some contribution for something that she was working on. And
that is awesome.
With her, and I was looking at this guy saying, I know this guy, and turned out to be Jan Molby. Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Well, we're definitely going to come back to that because one of the things I want to talk to you about is leadership. And I'm a huge fan, as is our commercial director, Nico, who's German, of Jurgen Klopp and his leadership styles. So we can definitely talk about that. But for those joining us, can you give us a bit of background to yourself, the PMI Institute, for those that don't know, and then tell us a little bit about the career prior to that as well, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the CEO and the president of the Project Management Institute. It's probably the world's largest professional institution that's advocating around the world of project management. It's 50 years old. It's not for profit. And the secret sauce of the entire operation really is the 300 chapters that we have around the world, and an army of volunteers, well over 12,000 volunteers that contribute their time and effort to really advocate the world of project management and how, you know, we can turn ideas and concepts into reality. And if you look at what is a project manager, you know, it is somebody who takes a concept, an idea, a direction, a vision, and manages that to a reality. And in any kind of industry group, whether it's telecommunications, IT, or whether it's construction. So it's a very broad remit. And I'm really proud to be part of that organization. You know, we say that it is not for profits, but it's also not for losses, right? So it's a very well run, very well managed organization. It's got some fantastic staff, great skills. And we're continuously thinking about how we can further the profession, you know, how can we maintain our relevance as things around us change, like technology and ways of working change, and things hit us like COVID, you know, from the side. And how do organizations and people reskill themselves if they need to, or trigger the skills that they've acquired in order to help in situations like that. So I love the organization. I've been there 18 months.
Yep.
A little bit about me. Prior to that, I ran my own organization for a little while. It was called I Want To, and it was all about I want to help, helping startup organizations to really sort of accelerate their sales into organizations. And I was very lucky because my career to date had really introduced me to lots and lots of very talented people who had progressed in their careers and taken senior roles in lots of, you know, incredible organizations around the world. And I'm very good at keeping in touch with many people. So they all have, quite senior roles now, and they were very easy access for small organizations to be able to tap into. So, it's a big problem for startups to actually build their sales channels and stuff. And that's what I12 was trying to do, was to sort of short circuit the sales process and get right to the decision makers quickly. And I helped organizations do that.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And prior to that, I had a little stint as a CEO of a telecoms company called Experio, based in the Netherlands. And prior to that,
Amsterdam, right?
In Amsterdam, that's right. Yeah. So I was very lucky, actually, again, because I've had the opportunity to live all over the world, really. And I think that's one of the secret sauce, if you like, of Sunil is I'm Indian sort of origin, but I was born and bred up north in England. Well, actually, I was born in Kenya, but grew up in near Liverpool, and then spent a lot of my life in France and the Netherlands and Singapore, 6 or 7 years in Singapore, and then back to the UK. So really got the opportunity to travel the world and pick up perspectives from different cultures and different ways of working, and that's really helped me a lot in my career, and it's certainly helping me a lot working at PMI, which is a global organization, operations around the world. So it really, and very passionate people that bring their thoughts and their processes and their contributions in different ways, and being someone who's more worldly than most, it's really helped me a lot. I think that PMI, before I came on board, was largely, the leadership was largely North American, and it had a very sort of North American heritage, which is good, and it's great, and it creates a fantastic foundation. But over the course of the last 3-4 years, it's been expanding into China, into Africa, into India, into Asia Pacific, Europe, etc. So, and Latin America. And I thought it was a good time for us to really become a lot more regionally focused, because there are different nuances, there are different ways that work is done in different regions, and
100%.
And so one of the things I brought to PMI really was this regional mindset, and really getting closer to the challenges and the issues of project managers in different parts of the world.
Okay.
So a little bit about me, global background, lived all over the world, worked in lots of different types of organizations, largely with a telecoms focus and an IT focus, but and in different function roles. I was a CFO for a little while for Pro Systems Europe, a qualified accountant. I've been in operations and sales at Nokia. I ran sales globally for Nokia Siemens Networks. And then I had very much in Vodafone, as you know, a sales operations role. So, all those skills all kind of like came together to help me to be, I hope, an effective CEO.
Yeah, the monolith that was and is the Vodafone sales organization. If you want to, it was kind of like, I remembered working with you guys, and it was sort of like navigating a maze, at night with very little vision. But I think if you recall, I mean, I remember coming in and I was speaking at one of your sales kickoffs. I remember that session, and I think we were talking about the changing nature of kind of B2B customer buying behavior and how commercial organizations were responding. And I think one of the key trends across kind of the B2B tech and services markets is that you've got businesses that are still spending a huge amount of time and effort in customer acquisition, right? And then there's, when you win this business, emotionally at that point in time, the customer is as happy as they can be, right? And I was talking with someone with someone else that I had on this podcast yesterday, and because in many cases, potentially that buying cycle has taken a long period of time, right? Okay, it might have taken a month, it might have taken 3 months, it might have taken a year or more. And so I think in many instances, like, the customer wants the thing that they bought right then and there, to be honest with you. But then, as you quite rightly say about the project management community, that is they are really the ones, if the sales organization is out there making the promises, they're the ones fulfilling that promise.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Take the words out of my mouth.
Yeah. So I think one of the things we really look at in this show, and that's why I think I'm really fascinated to have you on, is that there's this kind of like, there's that post-sale fulfillment, right? And that is so critical to that relationship with that customer, in the short term and in the long term. So I think what I'd be, would love to explore with you through this conversation is kind of how is that world changing, and how can using your organization or just think about this in terms of like professionalizing that, modernizing it, bringing in the right principles and mindsets. So maybe if we just double click on, like, you talked about the role of the project manager. Let's unpack that a little bit more, right? So how should organizations be thinking about what project management is at a high level? Let's maybe just start there.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, just a little bit rewind on that, if I may. I mean, first of all, organizations, when they buy something now, a lot more sophisticated. They pretty much know what they're looking for, or what the solution is that they're trying to fix. And so the life of the sales organization is always becoming tougher and tougher and tougher, because their customer, their target customer, is much more informed. They can go and Google stuff and find out a whole load of stuff about what they want first, before they even approach a salesperson about explicitly what they're looking for. And then on top of that, there's a lot of competition, and there are a lot of different ways to get stuff done. So what you find is that the sales organization often have to, in order to win the business, often have to promise quite a lot, and they have to lean forward in that promise. And then when they get back to their organization, they have to they almost like flip it over a fence to an operational team that says, okay, look, I promised this, and I need to deliver it in this time frame for this cost, whatever it is, that whatever business it's in. And that problem all of a sudden then goes to an operational organization, which then has to fulfill that promise. And the customer, as you say, he's just interested in the solution, or she's just interested in the solution. How you get there, what tools you use, the methodologies, the speed of operation, your responsiveness, your ability to be able to take on unforeseen circumstances to achieve that promise, is not really the concern of the buyer. It's the concern of the operation. And that's where project management comes into its own. And having been in sales for many years and run organizations, I realize now that, whilst the sales folks might be the ones who are flavor of the month when they're walking around with a big deal that they're trying to sell, and the whole organization is behind them, ultimately it falls upon the operational team to execute and deliver. And that's where project management comes in. You see it a lot happening in IT, well, certainly in telecoms, where traditionally telecoms were really telecoms organizations were providing connectivity, but more and more they're moving into services, and more they're moving into trying to add value-added services on top of their connectivity. And that requires a degree of service. That requires a degree of work that needs to be done beyond just connecting a pipe. You might be doing data analytics. You might be using AI to create new insights. You might be, running parts of an organization as a telco, on behalf of a customer. And that requires project management skills. And there are a set of skills which help you, which have been honed over years and years of practice and years of thought leadership on some specific project management capabilities that help organizations execute and convert ideas and PowerPoints and proposals into reality. And in essence, that's what project management's all about. Layer on top of that, actually, organizations internally deciding, hey, you know what, we need to change, we need to transform, we need to react to things like, unforeseen things like a pandemic, but actually more known things like our competition's reactions to things, taking our market share. So they need to react and change and transform. With the advent of technology coming on board, lots of work and systems and workflows are being automated. And, and that means that there are more opportunities for transformation and change. And again, project management plays a huge part in executing change and transformation. So there's a number of applications, and again, across every industry.
Yep. Okay. I mean, I think that evolution that you talked about there, from connectivity, right, to more to service. I think there's organizations out there that are still like in this order management and fulfillment environment, right? Yeah. We have an order, we fulfill that order. And I think, sometimes I know I've been in conversations with prospective companies, and we ask the question. It's like, what do you what do you want to achieve? A very simple question, like, what do you want to achieve? If you look back in 6 months from now, what do you want to achieve? And sometimes we'll get the answer. So, oh, let me send you some requirements, right?
Mm, mm,
And I sort of, if I'm not always involved in these conversations now, but some of the ones that I do sit in on, because I love attending sales calls, I say, well, look, I'm not being pushing back on that. That's all very relevant. But in your internal meeting, when your boss or your boss's boss says, what are we trying to achieve? You don't say, let me send you some requirements, do
uh,
you? So there's this sort of disconnect between what I would describe as like the experience that you're trying to achieve with your client, right? And I think there's this big transition at the moment from kind of like thinking in terms of projects almost to thinking in terms of like the overall engagement and the experience around it. I'm fascinated by the amount of PMOs, particularly the progressive ones, that are talking about experience, right? Of this effortless experience for the customer, because they don't really care if there's 160 tasks in this project and the governance of it. They just want to know, what am I supposed to do and when can I communicate to people internally that we're going to be changing the way that we do things. So I think in terms of that evolution, like, has that also been happening in the PMI itself in terms of how you guys think about the evolution of project management?
yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the PMO today, there's a lot of discussion about, okay, what should the PMO be doing? What should a program management office or a project management office be doing inside an organization? And in the past, it was very much, scheduling and planning and resource allocation and tracking and reporting, etc. And a lot of that stuff is being automated now. And it's very important stuff. You need to do that, right? But then that frees up the project office to actually think about other skills that they can do and they can bring to the table. And one of the ones that I've been thinking about and we've been developing within PMI is the need to really understand the strategic direction that the organization is trying to go and why a certain project, the context of the project, or the context of the programs of work that are going to be managed by the PMO. What are you trying to achieve? What is the outcome? And what is the impact that outcome is going to have? It's very important to understand, I think, the strategic thinking. And I think the PMO can play a role as the person that brings strategic thinking and execution together. It's almost like glue. So that's an important role that's evolving and developing. And with automation taking away a lot of the repetitive, almost codified components of a PMO, that frees up the PMO to really think about how do I approach my project in different ways, in ways that make sense, that are unique for that particular project. Because there's a risk that you can get a prescriptive methodology or a framework and say, okay, I'm just going to do everything by using Agile, or I'm going to do everything using a waterfall technique. And actually, that's not where the world is evolving to. The world is moving to a much more ambidextrous kind of way, where you use the kind of methodologies you need for achieving the outcome you're trying to achieve. And so therefore, when you look at the skill sets of a project manager, they're expanding. The technology component of it is becoming table stakes. And the power skills, or the softer skills, what we in PMI call the power skills, are becoming more and more important, like collaborative leadership, like empathy, like understanding business, business acumen. Understanding the ROI on a program can really help you prioritize. I remember at Vodafone, when I was running something that was called Project Spring, a massive 60-odd projects all running at the same time across the globe, a major transformation. And I was in charge of all of these 60 programs. And we had a massive PMO. But every 3 months, we'd have a budget cycle. And the finance teams were saying, hey, you know what, we have to find savings. And we were continuously looking at the different paybacks on all of these projects to see which one should we be accelerating, which one should we not. And the business was coming to me to say, okay, Sunil, we need to reprioritize. Something that you had as starting in 6 months has a much better return now, given the pivot that we're making as a business. Can we accelerate that program now? And it was almost being done real time. And we would use different techniques, different methodologies, but that was beyond your traditional PMO, in Vodafone. And I think that's happening across the globe. Much more emphasis on softer skills or power skills or super skills and much more reliance on technology to do the mundane stuff for you, so you can build on that. So I think that's directionally where we're going. If you look at what we're doing in PMI, we're not only are we we recently made an acquisition in Discipline Agile, and we wanted to get a really good point of view around the Agile space. Traditionally, PMI has been, the waterfall techniques, Well, Prince 2 is a, I wouldn't say it's a similar program of work to our PMP.
Okay, all right. So that is an alternative methodology. Okay.
Yeah, and so we also had a point of view in Agile. We wanted to boost that point of view. We made an acquisition last year in something that's disciplined Agile, which provides an overlay, a tool set for Agile, and it means that we can now talk with a sense of purpose and a sense of understanding, a depth of understanding around Agile, and integrate it. And a lot of Agilists will say you can't integrate with with traditional project manager, but I feel that you can. And you have to really look at what is the project you're trying to achieve, what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, and apply the right methodology. And we're going beyond that now. We're looking at, we have a program that we're going to be releasing shortly that's called Wicked Problem Solving. It's all about design thinking and understanding how to address problems and then apply technology and methodology and approaches to a particular problem. Outcome focused, value driven mindsets. And we're going even beyond. We're looking at, the citizen, what we call the citizen evolution, the use of the ability for any citizen with limited expertise in project management being able to pick up some of the skill sets to be able to apply project management skills to their problems. We feel pretty much everything that you do now at work, even at home, you could argue is some form of project, whether you are organizing, a holiday at home for your family, it's a project, or whether you are deciding to build a bridge or an extension on the side of your house, it's a project. Or whether you're creating an application, a software application, it's a project. So we call that, the evolution of the project economy.
Okay, cool. Well, we'd love to. So when we post these things, we will put in some links on Spotify. So it'd be great to get some of these links around these new things that the PMI is doing. I think that I really want to just talk, I think that's very, very relevant. And the things that we observe is, as you know, so our platform Precursive is used by PMOs and project management organizations to automate a lot of the resource management, particularly the capacity planning element of figuring out availability and then scheduling work and that type of thing, as well as taking kind of those project management principles and building them into project plans in our application and things of this ilk. But I think what's really interesting about what you talked about is that a lot of the time, the workload for a company, the way I describe it is it looks like a pyramid, right? At the top of the pyramid, you have your larger, much more bespoke programs, which require a set of skills and capability, business acumen, stakeholder management, given the level of complexity and value and risk associated with those things. You've then got a middle component, right, or a middle part of the portfolio, which is your, it's larger work. It might be, 3-6 month type engagements. It's got a mid-level value for that particular organization. And then at the bottom, you've got your much more highly transactional work. And you'll see that in telco with the difference between maybe activations teams versus professional services teams, right? And the portfolio of work that they deliver. But I think the point around Agile is really interesting because, and the mix, because you potentially are going to be flexing between those different types of work, right?
Yeah.
So organizationally, the PMO might have a group that's focused on the top. But very often, I think what's underappreciated is that your staff will very often be moving between these different types of work. And therefore, and I don't think people appreciate the either that stretches people or it stretches the processes. One of the things we really focus on because a lot of customers, when they're moving out of this kind of manual world of spreadsheets and phone calls and emails and stuff put on the walls, they always talk to us about automation, right? They say, we want to do automation in phase one. And we're like, well, do you actually know what good looks like? Do you and do you have the level of self-awareness to say we deliver that piece of work well and that piece of work not as well because of these things? Because if you don't, you're going to be automating bad processes, for example, right? And I think almost this like ground up approach of like figure out what good looks like on a piece of work. You deliver a piece of work one way and then deliver it a different way, and like actually analyze and understand what went well, what didn't go well, and what you can learn from that. So I just think that you know, the acquisition that you made totally makes sense, because I think we see that almost stretching of these organizations in different directions, and it's really difficult to handle. How would you advise companies to think about like navigating that? Because
Okay, so that's
not easy.
Well, A, it's not easy, and it's great that you're sort of reflecting that, because there's two or three things that we feel organizations are now having to grapple with, and more so now after COVID. One is that you know, there are parts of organizations, large organizations and small organizations, where there's a status quo. There's kind of like, it's always been done this way. And I think that organizations now are a lot more open to transformation and change. So the mindset to change now, in the past, you know, consultants would come and say, you need to do a transformation, and they'd struggle hard to convince an organization. They're resistant to change, and they don't, you know, it's tough to convince people to change something they feel is not broken, and they, you know, are happy with the way it's done. I think that propensity to resist there has gone away, because people recognize now that technology can play a big part. But you're quite right. You know, there's no point in just applying technology for the sake of applying technology. But one thing that technology does do, and has been able to do, is it's been able to codify and systemize a lot of non-cognitive work. So when you look at a legal department, for example, you know, much of the work that's going on in a legal department is around, you know, isolating cases that have occurred before to build a precedent, so that you can then apply whatever the problem is you're trying to, you know, grapple with now based upon previous case law. That kind of stuff can all be automated. So instead of having lawyers, you know, looking at for days, looking for various, you know, cases that they can apply as evidence towards their particular case, systems can do that for you. So that by the next day, when you show up at work, it's already laid out what all the context is and how you're arguing. So you can use technology in a very good way. And with AI, you can also get very cognitive thinking. You can actually get direction and learning that can help you in the direction that you want to go in. However, I don't see this as a you know, technology is going to come and take over my role. I think of it. I mean, somebody in a previous conversation was saying, think of it like, and I'm going to steal their thunder, but think of it like Iron Man versus the Terminator. Iron Man is all about using technology and the human mindset collectively in a synergistic way to create, you know, a very powerful situation. Or then you've got Terminator that's there to get rid of the human race completely, and it's completely automated and it's systematic, you know, very systematic. Yep. Think of the world of work in the future being very much like Iron Man, where technology is enabling you, and you are applying your human skills to get work done. The other overlay I'd like to share with you is, with all of the you know, the codification and the automation that's going on, organizations are thinking that in addition to their functional responsibilities that they may have, finance, HR, legal, etc., people within those organizations can actually also move from department to department to department if they are enabled with a set of skills that allow them to get work done, regardless of whether it's the finance department or it's the legal department. If there's a project that needs to be done or executed, you don't need, you know, I'm an accountant, and I can tell you 30 years ago, when I was learning about accounting, and I look at accounting today, I mean, so much of it is automated that you don't need much of what I learned 30 years ago, because it's become kind of like normal. You know, it's just done. You know, the systems do it. So I could actually move from department to department if I had project management skills and execute enhancements in, whether it's in the legal department or whether it's the finance department or sales department, as projects, which means that you could conceive that there will be project teams moving within an organization to different projects. That's also what we call the project economy, which means the entire organization needs to understand about delivery and execution. This pyramid that you're talking about,
Yeah.
I think that everyone in that pyramid, whether you're at the top of the pyramid, you're applying some specialized skills around agile or whatever, or whether you're at the bottom, you need to have some inherent understanding of how to get work done in your particular environment and what options you have and choices you have, so that when you get moved from the top of the pyramid to the bottom of the pyramid or the middle of the pyramid, you're applying a consistency, a mindset. You're almost being gymnastic in the way that you're operating, using different capabilities from different frameworks, from different methodologies to get your work done the way you need it done for your organization.
Yeah. I think though within that there's a little bit of there's still a little bit of pessimism sometimes in project management, right? Because historically it's a lot of been about a budget, a timeline, being on time, and this type of stuff, right? So there's a degree of pessimism in it, and I think again one of the things that we kind of encourage our clients to think about is like how do we bring in a degree of optimism about it? Because again, if it's the first step in the customer journey, we really want to be on the front foot, right? If we, particularly for companies in like a subscription economy, if that doesn't go well, then we're potentially looking at a churn risk very early on in our relationship with the client. And I think that there are still certain things within project management that are pessimistic in kind of their orientation. Like if you take risks and issues, right? Managing risks and issues on projects. We, for example, in our technology, we didn't have RAID logs in it. Right, deliberately so, because one, every company that we went to managed risks and issues a different way. So we will operate on Salesforce. So we said, look, it doesn't take much to like build it exactly as you want it on Salesforce, and we put it in our app. And they were like, oh, actually, that makes sense. It's like, why should we dictate to you how you manage risks and issues? You do it your way, and we'll just put it in our app. Oh, okay. And that doesn't take very long. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. However, we're now bringing something out in that area, for example. And we're always trying to be a little bit, I guess, a little bit different as an organization. One of the things I was saying, like my CTO and our co-founder, Andy, and I were talking about is like, okay, it's not risks and issues, it's risks and insights, right? Because what we want to be doing is, okay, there's going to be things that we need to manage and communicate to the customer in terms of risk, but we need to be capturing insight on what we're doing well and what we can replicate, what we've learned. Like, as you say, if you're in a construction project, right? And you learn that, for example, with a particular organization you work with, that this particular person, the health and safety guy, is the guy that we want to talk to because he'll get us on site within a couple of hours, not a couple of weeks, right? You want to know that stuff and you want to teach that stuff to the rest of your business so that if I'm not managing that work in the future with that customer, we can still learn it. So kind of this idea of like this optimism in project management optimism, as it were. What are you seeing kind of coming through in your world that reflects that?
So I think that there's a lot to be optimistic about. There's some challenges that we face right now, which we need to address, which is COVID, and it's taken the world a little bit by surprise, a lot of organizations by surprise. Many organizations now don't have the kind of financial clout that they had a year ago because of COVID. So, and at the same time, they know they need to change and transform. And they're doing that. So the optimism for project managers is that all of a sudden, their skill sets are becoming more and more in demand. It may not be right now, but certainly as the world starts to stand itself back up again, there's going to be a major requirement for people who can get work done and work done in different ways. So I think that if you look 2-3 years from now, you're going to see a big demand, I think, in different forms of project management. Mm-hmm. I think that each organization is going to approach its delivery differently, and whether you have one form of risk management methodology or another form is really up to the organization to figure out what it perceives is a risk for itself and how best to communicate that risk. I definitely think it's all about insight, and I think the more we can provide insight as PMI, as an institution, the better it is. And that's why it's great to have a global organization, because we're collating best practices from around the world by all different industries. And so we ultimately, when I first joined the company, I said, you know, it would be great if we could become almost like the encyclopedia for all things project.
Yep.
The place to go to if I'm building a dam and I want to understand, okay, what are the risks about building a dam from a, you know, an organization in Latin America, let's say, and what are the same, you know, how did an organization in Africa deal with those risks, and or how did an organization in China deal with those risks? I can enable myself with lots of different perspectives, lots of different points of view, and then select what I think is the most appropriate approach that I want to take, and know that my people have the skill sets to be able to apply that methodology or that approach for my particular circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really, really important that we have, that there is a wealth of knowledge and experience and best practices that are out there. And there are very few places that people can go to collate all of that and get the stuff that's contextually relevant for you individually. And we are hoping that PMI can become that vehicle for organizations across the globe, people, individuals across the globe, to tap into and create that capability, and also be enabled with a range of frameworks and a range of tool sets and a range of skill sets to help them with their specific problem. That's what I think there's going to be a big need in the next few years.
Okay, cool. Look, I really love the conversation today, Sunil, so thank you ever so much. I think we've got to end on, given that you are a Liverpool fan, we've got to talk about Mr. Klopp and what makes him so special. I think there's a lot. I found myself reading various articles after they won the title about him in more detail, and his history and his mindset and the way that he develops relationships with his players and the community and the fans and everything. And I just love him, right? I just love him. I think that he represents something in that sport, football, not soccer that you called it, not naughty, but football. It represents something that I think football's lost, which is this empathy and this involvement with the community and a degree of like values, right? Anyway, but not to be too negative on football, but what is it that like, you're a Liverpool fan, so what is it that you love about Jurgen Klopp, and what do you think we as people in the business world or society can learn from his approach?
Yeah, so look, first of all, Liverpool have had fantastic managers always, right? They just haven't, and the managers play a huge role in the success of the club, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. I think Klopp has brought, as you said, something really, really special into our club. First of all, it's a club that's got a very long heritage, and it has a very successful heritage, and it had been dry for a long, long time, from devoid of cups, with the exception of the European Cup, and the Premier League is like the pinnacle, and we've not won it for 30 years. It was a massive pain point for the supporters, for the players, for anybody who was associated with the club. And what Jurgen did was, he embraced that immediately. He realized that was the biggest pain point that the people were yearning for, not mentally, but in their heart. The supporters in their heart were yearning for a win in the Premier League, and so he grabbed that desire, that passion, and he reached out to the community with his human empathy and his authenticness and his frankness, to call it as it is, but not do it in a pompous way, as many managers tend to do today. He was very empathetic. He's a warm character. He has a big challenge on his hands. He's got to manage millions of resources, assets that have got all sorts of personalities. You've got to bring them all together, make them all think and feel the same way. And he inspired not only the supporters, but he inspired the players to go that one step further. And he did that by just being a simple guy, in a way. I mean, that's how he portrayed himself, right? As I don't know whether we see the real side of Jurgen. I think we do. I think it's very difficult to be that authentic in front of people. The way he would run onto the pitch waving his arms at the crowd when we've done something incredible, and pumping his fist in the air. That kind. I know other managers do that, but it's almost like they're doing it because they're professionally required to do it. He did it because he brought. I would argue he brought a little bit of control around Kevin Keegan's approach to management. If you remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kevin, led with his heart.
I was going to say, there's an element of vulnerability to him, right? In the way that he displays emotion, and I think that vulnerability in sport and in business is important. I think some people are scared of it, of displaying it, whereas actually it's a sign of strength.
It is. I mean, I've learned it's a sign of strength, and in my role at PMI, I try very hard to be as authentic as possible, inclusive as possible, and I realize that I don't, not everyone knows all the answers. They don't, and I think Jurgen will be the first one to admit that there were problems in Liverpool that he needed to fix. He gave it a shot. It worked, and we are where we are today. He's a great leader. He'll go down as a great leader. I hope he stays with us. I'm sure he will. I think he completely loves Liverpool, and that, and again, is a sign of someone who, he won't get tired in the morning, jumping out of bed and doing work at Liverpool. Like, I don't get tired. I'm so passionate about PMI. I don't get tired. I can just keep going. I love it. I truly have found a role and a purpose as the CEO of PMI that I love.
You're passionate about. Well, the passion comes through 100%. So listen, wonderful having you on. For those listening along, I was like, by the way, just beforehand, Sunil was like, yeah, I've not really read what we're going to talk about. Let's just wing it. And this is by far and away the best show we've had so far in my eyes. So I've loved it. Thanks ever so much, Sunil. Been great having you on.
Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, man.